Now we move to comprehensive plan update, climate change element, and with us we have Eileen Canola. Eileen. Hi.
Good afternoon. I'm Eileen Canola. I'm a senior planner with Snohomish County Planning and Development Services. And I'm going to try to improve the sharing of my screen right now. Okay, are you able to see my screen as a presentation?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to just stop sharing my video because I have to really peer into my screen. So I apologize for that, but I'm going to keep going, and please let me know if you have your hand raised, but it might be helpful to have the questions towards the end of the presentation.
Eileen,
Yeah.
sorry. We are looking at your notes version,
Okay.
not the presentations.
Oh, it's presentation view. Yeah, it's these little guys right here, I think. Okay, so I'm here to present the proposed climate change and resiliency element for the 2024 comprehensive plan update. And there you go. Please bear with me. I've got a new monitor, so I've been having difficulty switching back and forth from my laptop to the other. So I appreciate your patience. So the purpose of this briefing is to describe the climate change and resiliency element and provide an overview of the proposed amendments. To summarize the public comments and all of the input that received from county departments and others to date, and provide an opportunity for the commissioners to ask any questions and provide feedback. And as you know, with the other presentations, you have received a detailed staff report as part of in advance of this presentation. And in that report, you do have two attachments. And one attachment is a table that has the proposed policies for this climate change and resiliency element. And then the other attachment has the narrative. So it's the text. So the text and the proposed policies will combine to create the chapter. And again, as Amber mentioned, that this is a briefing, so public comments will be received during the Planning Commission hearing, which will be in October. So what is the climate change and resiliency element? It is a response to the immediate need for comprehensively planning for climate change in the county. And it includes reducing greenhouse gas emissions and responding, adapting, and planning for the current and projected impacts of climate change. So the county has opted to move forward with this proposed element, even though it is an optional element at this time. State law just passed within this legislative session through House Bill 1181 that requires a climate change element for certain jurisdictions as is part of their update, but for the Snohomish County, it's not requiring it until 2029. But we're moving forward with it because we feel we need an immediate response to what we're feeling and what we're hoping to plan for with climate change. And a lot of what's going on with our communities at the time, and with heat and with a lot of the wildfire risks and a lot of the projected impacts that are coming through the UW Climate Change Impacts Group. So we're seeing a lot of stuff on the ground right now, and we're think it's a very good idea for the county to comprehensively address climate change. So this element consists of two sub-elements. One is a climate resiliency element, and the other is a greenhouse gas emission reductions element. And this element supports state, regional, and local efforts for greenhouse gas emission reductions and climate resiliency. So now just to talk about the background, a lot of the sources for this particular element derive from Puget Sound Regional Council's Vision 2050 and their multi-county planning policies and their regional growth strategy, the revised countywide planning policies, the county's existing work on sustainability and climate change, the initial growth targets that the county recently adopted, and public input, including the vision statement for the 2024 update, the guidance document on a climate change element from the Washington State Department of Commerce, and the county's climate change vulnerability and risk assessment, which was recently completed and funded through a grant from Commerce. So first and foremost, this element really works from a lot of the existing work that's in the climate change and sustainability section from the natural environment element. So we do have some existing policies in our comprehensive plan right now that we've used as a basis for this element. We've also included and integrated a lot of the existing county work that the county is in the process of completing it or has completed and is managing right now. For example, we have a sustainable operations and action plan for county operations and programs. We work very hard on hazard mitigation planning. The Department of Emergency Management it will be currently updating its hazard mitigation plan. We work with the ag industry, and we coordinate closely with them. We have a dedicated Office of Energy Sustainability. We have a good park system that includes open space and tree canopy. And as part of the natural environment element, you probably have received a briefing on the proposed tree canopy policies. We have a land conservation initiative that's being managed by the Office of Energy and Sustainability, as well as a transfer of development rights program. That same office also manages a low-income weatherization program and energy assistance program. And it also manages a commercial property assessment for clean energy and resiliency programs, the CPACER program. So the county has throughout the years and past updates to the comprehensive plan, they have addressed climate change. But what's different about this element is that we are working to comprehensively address it, not just with this comprehensive plan, but also through our county operations and in general. So as I mentioned, House Bill 1181 was a big contributor to this element. It adds a new GMA planning goal for climate change and resiliency. It requires a climate change and resiliency element for jurisdictions required to plan under GMA. It adds new requirements for the land use, transportation, parks, and capital facilities element related to climate change. And it directs Commerce to work with other state agencies to provide guidance and documents and funding opportunities relative to the climate change element. So this is the new climate change and resiliency goal that's part of our Growth Management Act. Is to ensure that comprehensive plans, development regulations, and regional policies, plans, and strategies under RCW 3670A210 and Chapter 47.880 RCW, which is the Shoreline Management Program, adapt to and mitigate the effects of a changing climate, support reductions in greenhouse gas emissions and per capita vehicle miles traveled, prepare for climate impact scenarios, foster resiliency to climate impacts and natural hazards, protect and enhance environmental, economic, and human health and safety, and advance environmental justice. So this goal and the required element is really the basis for our new element. And Commerce has developed a model element. They've provided early guidance, which was published in June of this year. An intermediate draft is due at the end of this year. And of course, it implements the requirements from House Bill 1181. The model element includes, again, the sub-element for mitigation of greenhouse gas emissions reduction and a climate change resiliency sub-element. So in May of this year, we briefed the Planning Commission on a vulnerability and risk assessment mapping tool, and we provided a demonstration of that. Again, this was funded through a grant by Commerce, and the Climate and Vulnerability Index really helped inform us of where some of our vulnerabilities are in terms of climate change. So those have really been instrumental in helping us draft some of the policies and the text for this climate change element. Vision 2050 includes 12 climate change related policies that are reflected in this proposed element. And again, that's part of your the packet that you received. And for anybody who's watching, the agenda does include links to all those documents. And there are 7 climate change specific countywide planning policies, and these are also reflected in the proposed element. And this is very important. The vision statement was created through a lot of public input, but also it was coordinated with and consistent with Puget Sound Regional Council's Vision 2050 and our countywide planning policies. So I know you've seen this slide from other presenters, but the gist of this is that our vision statement is that we're all in this together. It really is going to require an interdisciplinary approach to get to the vision for 2044, which is in Snohomish County is a resilient and vibrant and inclusive place to live with a high quality of life where all residents can thrive. And in terms of this element, resiliency and conservation, communities are resilient to the changing climate. Special efforts continue to support our most vulnerable populations, such as our low-income populations that Amber was referring to for housing. The county has achieved the regional greenhouse gas reduction target and implemented transportation and building practices that conserve resources and promote healthy living. The county is well prepared to respond to natural disasters and emergency events to keep communities safe. In terms of public participation, the county completed a SEPA scoping, which began November 1st of 2021 and ended on December of that year. We held 2 public meetings in March of 2023 for the Climate Change Vulnerability and Risk Assessment Tool, in which we provided context and the relationship between the tool and the climate change element for the comprehensive plan update. We have held periodic meetings with the county's Climate Action Advisory Committee, and we've briefed the Agricultural Advisory Committee, board rather, and we did have a comment period on the draft policies for this element from March 31st to April 30th of 2023. So to provide an overview of the draft narrative or the text for this element, the draft narrative demonstrates consistency with Vision 2050 and with the vision statement for the 2024 comprehensive plan. It provides the context with GMA, in particular, the new climate change and resiliency planning goal and the required element. It demonstrates consistency with both the multi-county planning policies as well as the countywide planning policies. And it really recognizes and underscores the interdisciplinary need for implementation of the policies. It touches on other elements that contribute to greenhouse gas emissions reduction, such as the transportation element, the natural environment element, the land use, and the parks element. And it also touches on that same interdisciplinary concept with the resiliency element as well. In terms of the greenhouse gas emission reduction sub-element, it underscores the connection, as I mentioned, with other elements of the plan that address greenhouse gas emission reductions. It provides the context for greenhouse gas, what greenhouse gases are, and their global warming potential. It covers 2 types of greenhouse gas emissions inventory, one for the county operations and another for the countywide. And it recognizes the regional greenhouse gas emission reduction target from Puget Sound Clean Air Agency. And for the resiliency sub-element, it reinforces that connection with other elements of the comprehensive plan that help build climate resiliency. It provides steps and examples from the U.S. Climate Resiliency Toolkit that helps build resiliency for jurisdictions and municipalities. And it covers the applicability of the county's climate change and vulnerability risk assessment tool for this element. But what these, both these sub-elements really are used as a springboard for some of the work that the county will be doing in the future. There is a plan from the Office of Energy and Sustainability to work on a county-wide climate resiliency plan that's in the works. So this is really used as a springboard to help implement a lot of the policies through that comprehensive planning, but as well as the efforts from the Department of Emergency Management with their hazard mitigation plan update and other works that they're doing for climate change related and to increase our resiliency. So the draft policies, as an overview, you do have the spreadsheet before you, but as an overview, there are a general climate change and resiliency policy. So there's one general goal with one objective and 4 policies. The greenhouse gas emission reduction sub-element has 1 goal, 3 objectives, and 23 policies. And the resiliency sub-element has 1 goal, 3 objectives, and 15 policies. And those should all be before you in the packet that you received. So climate change, so the first goal is really to help build the resiliency of Snohomish County's communities, economy, environment by comprehensively addressing climate change. That is our goal. And it has the objective to ensure that we do it in a manner that's equitable, and it really includes a lot of the marginalized, historically marginalized, and currently marginalized communities, and to really assist those that are most vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. So, and then there's policies associated with those, including establishing an interdepartmental climate change committee, coordinating with local communities, agencies, and public services, using best available climate science, and ensuring that we have a robust and a very meaningful public engagement process. Goal 2 is really centered on greenhouse gas emissions reductions to achieve that regional greenhouse gas target from the Puget Sound Clean Air Agency, which is 50% below 1990 levels by 2030 and 80% below 1990 levels by 2050. And then also to support state efforts to achieve net zero carbon by 2050. And the objective under that goal is to implement best practices and strategies for Snohomish County government, services and operations that minimize greenhouse gas emissions. And there's several policies related to that. And then the second objective is to pursue energy and water conservation, recycling, and use of renewable resources for county facilities and operations. And that also covers the policies under that objective. Really focus on improving solar installations with storage, and trying to seek funding for county facilities for improved energy efficiency, water conservation, implementing technologies to improve efficiency and limit greenhouse gas emissions, and just really focuses on energy conservation and building to a green standard. So objective C under that goal is to develop strategies for Snohomish County to minimize greenhouse gas emissions and increase carbon sequestration with our partners and the community. So this is more about having a greenhouse gas emissions inventory, supporting efforts to decarbonize our transportation systems, diverting our organic waste from landfills, and reducing our methane emissions, and supporting implementation of the state's climate change initiatives and work towards a common framework to analyze climate change impacts under SEPA. So again, just as a reminder, many of these new policies are really to implement our county-wide planning policies as well as our multi-county planning policies. Objective 2D is to promote energy and water conservation practices, recycling, and to really strive for and support new and renewable energy resources within Snohomish County communities. So again, building green practice, promoting green building practices, really seeking that funding to assist households with weatherization, energy efficient upgrades, support the development of alternative energy sources, and provide educational information and seek to develop incentive programs for the public and businesses to transition to carbon-based, carbon-free energy and fuel sources. The resiliency sub-element goal is to build the resiliency of Snohomish County's communities, environment, and economy by responding and adapting to the impacts of climate change. One of the objectives is to identify and assess the current and projected impacts of climate change for Snohomish County. And that is, again, accomplished through our climate change vulnerability and risk assessment tool. So we want to complete that and also periodically update it. To develop a community-wide adaptive management plan, which I mentioned earlier from the Office of Energy and Sustainability is working on that through their community-wide climate resiliency plan, coordinating very closely with the tribes, agencies, and public to address climate change impacts. And to really work on monitoring and responding to the threat of infectious diseases where appropriate. The objective 3B is to establish clear actions that assist community members, especially the most vulnerable, and to build a resiliency to the adverse impacts of climate change. So that's really about coordinating our responses to extreme weather events. So that entails a lot of work from our Department of Emergency Management, our public health, and a lot of other agencies that we coordinate with, preparing for and mitigating the effects from wildfires and smoke by developing a community wildfire protection plan, which the Department of Emergency Management is currently working on, to establish a response for wildfire smoke and unhealthy levels of air quality, support educational and funding opportunities to strengthen food security, provide public emergency alerts in the prevalent languages of communities in the county, and encourage community scale resources such as emergency hubs, community gardens, and local food banks that really help strengthen the resiliency of our communities. Objective 3C is to increase the resilience of the county's economy and infrastructure to the impacts of climate change by coordinating efforts between planning partners. And these are the policies under that objective. So it's really about working with the ag communities, the business, our business community, our transportation systems, and then thinking about minimizing the adverse impacts on the natural environment and really looking at addressing sea level rise and storm frequency and intensity. So our next steps is really to get any of the feedback from the Planning Commission that we receive tonight, and we can work on that with Taylor, through communicating through Taylor. And of course, we can't answer all the questions tonight, but we will definitely have follow-ups with you. And the public hearings, of course, on all the 2020 updates are October 25th through the 27th, I believe. It might be the 24th through the 26th. I might have had that wrong on the slide. I will check with Taylor. And again, we do, as the 2024 update will continue to receive public input. And with that, I will stop sharing my screen and take any questions.
Thanks, Eileen. Any questions for Eileen while she's here? Commissioner Pedersen.
Yes, thanks, Eileen. Great presentation. And again, it looks like we got a real heavy lift here, achieving some pretty aggressive goals. One question that I was unsure about was when we get into sequestration project, and let's assume we can cut emissions by or have absorption of 10% of our goal. Is that counted in the math in terms of achieving this 80% reduction from the 1990 levels, in terms of calculating whether or not we've achieved a goal?
I think a lot of the focus for meeting that regional strategy, the regional emission reductions goal, is really about cutting our emissions first and foremost. I think it's a little difficult to track exactly how much the contributions of carbon sequestration work because they kind of vary. But I think there are definitely ones that have proven to be very helpful. In that, in particular, our wetlands and estuaries have a great capacity for storing carbon. I mean, that's a given, and we do know the math on that. So we do know that we're working. The county has been working to enhance our estuaries and our wetland areas to not only protect them for their great benefits to fish and forage animals, but also for carbon sequestration as well, which is a big help with that. We do have a wedge analysis tool that we were given as part of our county-wide greenhouse gas emissions inventory, which we can take that carbon sequestration into consideration how we're meeting our greenhouse gas targets. So we will be doing that in the future. But right now it's more about all hands on deck for getting that. And I think right now we're really focusing, I know the state and the federal government are really focusing on reducing our greenhouse gas emissions and kind of decarbonizing a lot of our systems first and foremost. I think adding that layer of carbon sequestration is also going to be beneficial, no doubt. But in terms of a lot of the work that's being done, there's a huge focus on decarbonizing right now. But we do have a consideration for the big assistance and help that wetlands and estuaries and trees and open space do contribute to that as well.
Yeah, and in a way, I look at this and in the Pacific Northwest and particularly Snohomish County, we've got clean power already, so that leaves us just a couple pieces of the pie to focus on, which means that the transportation element, and I actually think the transportation element is achievable, but boy, it's going to take a lot. So then where do you take all of this out of industry and all of this out of homes? I mean, it's a big challenge in a short period of time. And even with the emphasis we have now, I don't think we're at the 1990 levels currently. I think we're back on the acceleration curve coming out of COVID. So it's going to be a big challenge, but you got to set the goal or else you never achieve it, right?
Right.
Thank you.
Thanks, Commissioner Pedersen. Yeah, it's almost like throw your hands up and don't try, but that's the worst thing we could do. We have to dig in and make things happen. Any other thoughts, questions for Eileen? I liked your vulnerability index. It helped me. Commissioner Sheldon.
Sure. Where would you get a copy of the last comprehensive planning?
I mean, the 2015 comprehensive plan.
Yes.
It's online, and I can send that link to Taylor, and then she can send it to you.
Sure. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
No, just my glass. Of course, you set a high bar for yourself. What have we done in 2015 that we wanted to do and didn't do, compared to this one? We're shooting a high goal, and who knows? I probably won't be around in the next one. So we set goals on the first one. How much, what is the percentage you think you'll hit the goals on this one going forward?
So there's various goals. So just getting back to your first question, some things that we had in the 2015 update that we didn't quite get to, but we're getting to this time? I would say one of those items is a vulnerability and risk assessment tool. That was one of the policies that we had in our climate change and sustainability section in natural environment, but we never got around to doing it. But this time we have, with the help of Commerce with the grant, we were able to complete that climate change vulnerability and risk assessment. And as you know, commissioners, that is a very helpful tool to understand where we are vulnerable in the county to climate change.
Yes.
Go ahead, sorry.
No, you're right. You're correct. So I was just wondering. Yeah, I liked the report, and I said everything, but I was just trying to figure what was our record in 2015, and we didn't get there. But you're kind of telling me, well, we got quite a ways, especially with the last year or so. And that's and I was reading all this. This is great if we could do this by 2044. Yes, it's a good goal. That's it for me, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Mr. Sheldon. You're too irascible. You'll be around for the next plan too. Any other thoughts or questions for Eileen? In my reading, I came across the word fluorinated, and I guess it's CO2 on turbocharge. What can you explain that a little bit? I guess it's horrific impact from it, whatever fluorinated is.
I'm sorry, what was your question?
It's the term is fluorinated. What I wrote down after that was LAI. If anybody else remembers seeing that word in your reading, it's called fluorinated. Don't worry about it. If you can't remember, that's fine. But it has a real high carbon impact. It's a huge footprint. I don't know if you've heard that term before. I just came across it in the reading. That's okay. That's okay. Any other questions for Eileen while she's here? At least on this subject? Okay, well, thanks very much. I appreciate the detail that you go into and you're working. It's good.